Here comes the harbor hopper. I think it's stuck in traffic. There it is. How exciting. Alright, we're on the harbor hopper, getting ready to go. We're excited.
Yeah.
There's 32 people on board. We have to come back with at least 30.
Yeah. Give or take one.
Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Oh, I usually have to remind people that this vehicle runs on enthusiasm, not diesel. But it's clear we've got some enthusiasm on board today. So welcome aboard the Harbor Hopper. My name's Jeff. I'm going to be your driver / captain. And with me is the incredible Bethany, who will not only be your guide, but also your first mate. A couple things before we hit the road for your safety. This vehicle is 12 feet wide. The streets in Halifax, well, they're only 10 feet wide. So we are going to be getting close to trees, vehicle stop signs, who knows what else. So I'd ask that you please keep your arms, your legs, cameras, phones, anything of value, even your kids, inside the harbor hoppers. We're traveling through the narrow streets of Halifax. Do we have any fellow Maple Leaf fans on board?
No.
Well, young men, my friends remind me that this vehicle is old, and it was built around the last time that our team won the Stanley Cup. Probably before you were born. But this, let's just say that this girl, she's aging gracefully. It creaks, it rattles, makes some strange sounds. There's an electromagnetic braking system that kind of makes the boat shudder a little bit. All that is normal, nothing to be concerned about. If, however, there was an area of concern, it would be this. We have no suspension, just the air in the tires, and you notice you're not wearing seat belts. So I'd ask that you remain seated and securely so we're traveling through the narrow and bumpy streets of Halifax. In terms of water protection or water safety, a couple things I'm required to tell you. And to this young lady here, do you know what we call that area?
All right, here we go.
Yep. Okay, well, welcome on board once again. As Jeff said, my name is Bethany. I'm going to be your tour guide for the next 55 minutes or so. And because we are going to be spending some time together, I figured we should learn a little bit about one another. I'm not actually from Halifax. I was born and raised in Kingston, Ontario. Now, Hudson University attracted me to this beautiful coast 5 years ago. I fell in love with this city. I stayed there through the summers of my university, and I have since graduated and don't plan on leaving anytime soon. This is my 4th summer working on board the Harbor Hopper, and I absolutely love telling folks about this city's history and showing off some of the sights and stories. Now, I would like to find out a little bit about you folks as well. See where everyone is visiting us from today. It's certainly exciting that we were able to have more people coming through our city. I've certainly missed being able to chat with people from all of our other parts of Canada and all in the world. So it's great to have visitors back with us. I'll start with some different areas. I'll just say them off. I want you to put up your hand. Feel free to give a cheer, and then we'll find out where everyone's from. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right, I'll start with locals. Who here is from the city of Halifax today? Woo, okay, we have a number of locals on board, my fact checkers. Gotta keep me on my toes. Do we have anyone visiting us from kind of the HRM in general? Maybe you had to travel a little ways to get in here today, but not too far. No? Okay. What about the general province of Nova Scotia? Woo! Whereabouts? Pictou County. Welcome, folks. Alrighty, let's move over a province. Who do we have here from New Brunswick today? Welcome. Whereabouts in New Brunswick was it, folks?
Woodstock.
Woodstock. Welcome. Prince Edward Island. Any visitors from PEI?
Nope.
No? What about Newfoundland and Labrador? Welcome. Glad to have you.
Oh, cool.
Quebec. Anyone from Quebec? Oh, yes. Those are the back of Montreal, is it? Yes? Awesome. Welcome. Let's go to Ontario. Anyone visiting us from Ontario? Welcome, sir. Glad to have you. Whereabouts? Oh, North Bay. Welcome. What's next over? Manitoba. Welcome. Winnipeg, right? Glad to have you, sir. Saskatchewan. We'll go right. Nice. Whereabouts in Saskatchewan? Sorry? Close to Saskatoon. Glad to have you. How about Alberta? Have you guys with us? Now there is another introduction we have to do here today. Of course, the vessel that we're on. This was not built as a harbor hopper. It was built as a Lark 5, which stands for lighter amphibious resupply cargo. The 5 stands for 5 tons this was designed to carry. And these vessels were used in the Vietnam War to bring troops into the jungles and beaches.
That's cool.
Now the U.S. military built 900 of these at the cost of $900 million. Of course, that is $1 million per vessel, making this one of the most expensive vehicles in downtown Halifax, although there are a couple sports cars in the area that rival us. Truly in the lap of luxury here today. Of course, we did have to make a few changes. We installed the finest pleather seating money can buy just for your comfort. Also, did a little bit of a paint job to make this more exciting and welcoming to visitors. Last but not least, we removed the 250 caliber machine guns that sat at the bow and the stern. You can imagine why. There we have the harbor hopper as we know it today. Now, before we get into any city history here today, I would like to acknowledge that all of the HRM is on unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq territory. This area was inhabited by the Mi'kmaq people for 15,000 years prior to settlers arriving in 1749. And of course, the name Halifax will be
It's hard to see you guys.
well. This area was known as Chibuktuk, which means Great Long Harbor.
Oh, there you
You'll
go.
see a little bit later on why that name
That's
is
our
also
hotel over
fitting.
there.
Now, when those settlers did come in 1749, there were 3,000 of them, and they came on 3 different ships. The reason Halifax was the name that was kind of chosen at that time is because the Minister of Trade is the one who was in charge of sending people over here, and his name was Lord Montague Dunk, formerly known as Lord Halifax. Thus, we got the name at that point. When settlers did stone lions there, NASCAC is one of the 5 post-secondary institutions that we have in our city, along with Dalhousie, St. Mary's, Mount St. Vincent, and Nova Scotia Community College. We have our town hall over to the left-hand side here. This was actually the original location of Dalhousie University before it became our town hall. Mayor Mike Savage does his work out of here today. Now, in front of Town Hall, we have our Grand Parade Square, which you'll see shortly. When the school Dalhousie was in this location, it was actually used as a grazing grounds for the students' livestock.
How's it going to get through here?
I won't see any Dal students grazing their livestock there today, I can assure you that. But kind of neat that that's what it was originally used for. We got a tight squeeze here.
Holy moly. This guy's a good driver.
Parade Square is a gathering place for all sorts of different events. You can see they have a big event going on here now. They have different concerts that take place here. Sometimes you'll notice protests happening within the square. Sometimes they'll have different ceremonies as well. We have a Remembrance Day ceremony that occurs on these grounds. And in addition, people just come down here for lunch from the surrounding office buildings. They'll enjoy a nice sunny afternoon, hang out here with some friends. So, a multi-purpose area for sure. And Jeff's really got it rough right now. They've been doing some setup for this event happening down here. I guess maybe today is the day it's actually going to happen with all these different trucks going on. Congrats to Jeff. Round of applause for Jeff here, folks.
That was tight.
Now, as we turn up Carmichael Street here, folks, over to the left-hand side, you're going to see the 5 Fishermen Restaurant. Not only is it a great spot to grab a bite to eat.
Listen to this, guys.
It was the original location of NASCAC University's campus. It then got sold off and became the City Mall. Now, this was in the early 1900s, and it actually housed victims of the disaster of the Titanic. So before those victims were buried around in the surrounding cemeteries, they were there, stored there. That gives it an interesting set of ghosts, you could say. It has the title of the most haunted building in Halifax. Ask anyone who works there, they have some interesting stories, and I guarantee none of them like to go up to the upper level by themselves on a closing shift. Pretty interesting for sure, a little bit spooky. But if you're interested in stuff like that, we do actually have a ghost tour of Halifax, so you can learn more about the surrounding buildings and Halifax's haunts. Now we're turning onto Brunswick Street. It used to be titled Barrack Street because of the barracks that were located at the north end, where soldiers who worked up in the garrison would live, eat, and sleep. Well, there were also a lot of bars down along here at that point, and soldiers liked to visit those before heading back home. For that reason, locals started nicknaming this road Knuckle Down Street simply because of all the fights that broke out down along here. Still a few bars, much less of a Knuckle Down Street. Over here, close to the left-hand side, we have the Halifax Academy building. This was the first formal school to be established in the city. Ever since its doors opened in 1878, it has been used as a center for education. Story associated there too with the Halifax explosion. On the day that the blast occurred, a teacher in her class was in one of the schoolrooms there. The students saw the mud log burning in the harbour, so they ran to the windows to see what was going on. Well, the teacher, of course, wanted them sitting down doing their schoolwork. She asked them back to their seats, and when they returned, she closed the heavy curtains to prevent further distraction. A few minutes later, the explosion went off. All glass in the city imploded, but the heavy curtains stopped the glass from reaching any of the students. With a little bit of sternness, she managed to save their eyesight and potentially lives.
Oh, wow.
Now, as we climb up Citadel Hill, not only can you see over the downtown into the harbor, but you'll get a great view of one of our most famous landmarks, our Old Town Clock. This clock here on the side of the hill itself was commissioned back in 1803 by Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent. He was a very punctual man, wanted to instill that value in some of the soldiers here. So, that clock was built, still uses the exact same clock mechanism it was originally constructed with. So it's been keeping time here for over 200 years, although now it's only wound twice weekly just to not put any excess strain on the mechanism. Everybody give a wave to the folks working at the Citadel today. You can go in and visit them more closely if you'd like. This is for George IV fort that stood in this location, although they were smaller versions, kind of various locations on the hill itself. They have a really neat living history program that goes on within the fort. You can learn about how the fort would have been when it was in operation, and you can talk to people dressed up in traditional era clothing, see what their specific role might have been. Beside us, we have this big deep ditch. This is a dry oak used for defense. The idea here was that soldiers running up from the bottom of the hill wouldn't necessarily see this ditch. They'd run up, and then soldiers in front blocking their view behind, pushing them forward, fall in. If you were unlucky enough to make that tumble, soldiers would then be waiting, pointing their muskets from the surrounding windows on the inside wall, and you can probably take a good guess as to what would happen next. Now just over this way, we have some of the original building material of our fort. This is ironstone along this wall. Ironstone was resistant to cannon and musket fire, so that's why they used it. However, it's not too resistant to the elements here in Halifax. It rains or snows on average of 180 days per year here, followed by about 100 days of fog. So all that moisture over the years has caused quite a bit of erosion. Over time, they've been replacing it with granite, which you can see on this wall beside us. Granite holds up much better to the elements, maybe not so much to cannon and musket fire, but luckily we haven't had to deal with too much of that. We are about halfway around the Citadel here now. You may have noticed Jeff's been weaving in and out quite a bit. Don't you fret, no rum in his afternoon coffee. It's just because our fort is built in a bastion-style formation. A bastion is an 8-pointed star, and this, like the dry moat, is for defense. At each point of the star, not only would soldiers get a great vantage point overlooking the area they were defending, but they would also be able to crossfire upon anyone running up in between points, so just a little bit more efficient in terms of that aspect of defense. Despite all this though, we've actually never once been attacked here in Halifax. I like to say it's because Haligonians are so friendly. Who would want to attack us? But I think the real reason is that this fort took 28 years to build and wasn't finished until 1856. By that time there wasn't too much to worry about, so beautiful historic site that we have today. Now folks, as we continue around this curve here, look up into the port, you'll notice two white signaling masts that are sticking out. The taller of the two used to send signals up to ships coming into harbor. Anything you need to be aware of, a blockade, any certain activities going on, who all was in the harbor at one time. The shorter of the two masts, I think, is a little bit more interesting. It was part of a long-distance signaling system, and that could send a message all the way from here to Annapolis Royal, about 150 kilometers away. They could get a signal there in a little over an hour, believe it or not, which I know by today's standards is quite slow, but for back then, that was remarkably quick. They'd use flags by day, lanterns by night. The signal would be sent up on that mast, then out in the harbor, Fort Charlotte would observe that, copy the same signal up on her mast, next port on would do the same, and so on, until it reached its final destination. So, a lot better than sending someone on horseback to travel all that distance. Very efficient system, and I'll point out Fort Charlotte in the harbor a little bit later on. Now, for those of you visiting us from out of town, one of the most beautiful landmarks in our city is the beautiful public gardens. They're just up this way, for those of you who want to take a visit to them later on in your visit. They're at the second set of lights, which are green there. That's one of the back entrances. The corner resides just on there. So if you would like to visit them, that's where they are, just up that road. And I can certainly give you more detailed directions from the parking lot if you're wanting to head there after. It's pretty rich in history, specifically British military history. It is home to the last remaining original barracks that were built for the garrison. It's also home to the oldest officers' mess in North America, and it's home to the oldest military library in the country as well. The Cambridge Military Library was funded by the conquest of present-day Maine as we know it at that time. It was taken over by occurred, so now we know it's part of America. But at that point, funds from that were used to start up this library. You can do tours there. They have lots of really cool documents if you are interested in British military history. They don't have a formal online schedule. They kind of do it as demand is present. So if you do want to do a tour there, you just have to phone in and they might be able to work something out with your schedule. Turning onto Spring Garden Road here shortly, folks. Spring Garden is the busiest pedestrian street east of Montreal and north of Boston. Just around 15,000 people on average walk up and down there every single day. Lots of shops, a few different restaurants and patios. For those of you out of town, you never know when you need a drugstore or a bank. They're up there as well. So yeah, lots to see and do. But a lesser known fact about this area is that the whole lower section of Spring Garden Road, kind of from in this intersection onward, is on top of 25,000 graves. Early 1800s, there was a center for the unhoused here, and it was very cramped conditions. A lot of sicknesses spread, not very good sanitation, so many people died very quickly, which of course is very sad, and there's a lot of those graves just right under this roadway here. There are no some graves in this cemetery here, although this cemetery at the time would have been reserved for what would have been considered the wealthy citizens, someone who would have been able to pay to be buried in this area. There are 12,000 people buried within here, 1,200 headstones, so there are a few mass graves still within this cemetery as well. One notable person buried within there was a man by the name of Major General Robert Ross. He fought bravely in the Napoleonic Wars, in the War of 1812. If you guys ever had to learn about, in your history classes in school, the guy who tried to burn down the White House during the War of 1812, that was actually him. And his last dying wish was to be buried in Halifax. Sadly, he fell at the Battle of Baltimore, 1814. So his comrades, they wanted to respect this. He'd been here a number of times through his life. Well, they gathered his body, but they knew it was going to be a long journey. So, to preserve it, they plopped it in a barrel of Jamaican whiskey. Maybe the preservation methods aren't what they are today, but, you know, alcohol did a pretty good job. After 2 weeks of travel, they got here to Halifax, they buried their general, then they were sitting down reminiscing about their old commander, and they looked down, they realized they had all that liquor left over still. Are they just going to dump it out? I don't think so. Each of them dipped in a glass and had one last toast in honor of Major General Robert Ross. It was said to be Halifax's first full-body run. is when I tell that joke, my best joke on tour, and I just get silence.
Oh.
Oh, it hurts. But thank you guys. Best tour group. Yeah, we are on Barrington Street here at the moment. Barrington Street, again, like Spring Garden, there's certainly some things to see and do down along here. Some really well-known restaurants. They also have some little boutiques and shopping. So if you're looking for anything like that, again, folks, you can chat with me after the tour. I'm happy to give you guys suggestions or directions or look up anything for you like that. But you'll notice down along here there is a lot of Georgian-style architecture and a lot of buildings with those blue, green, gold plaques. That just shows that they're registered heritage properties, which is kind of neat. And it also puts some interesting building regulations on them. Now, just over here, we have St. Paul's Anglican Church. St. Paul's Anglican Church, like I mentioned before, was the first building they started construction on in 1749. It took about a year to build, finished by the summer of 1750, and the first church service there was September 9th of that year. Oldest running church in Halifax, still has services today. And it's funny, there's actually a pew reserved in there for whoever sits on the throne of England. It's distinguished by its purple seating. So if Queen Elizabeth II ever decides to come back, she has been through here once and sat in on a service there, her spot is still saved.
Oh, wow.
Now just down at this end, folks, we have our town hall once again, just a different angle here. Interesting fact about town hall, it also used to be our jail at the time, kind of combined in one common practice. But it imprisoned a famous individual, Harry Houdini, the illusionist, escape artist, and magician.
Oh.
He had a show here in Halifax one evening, and it supposedly went quite well, because afterwards he was arrested for public intoxication.
Oh.
Celebrated maybe a little bit too hard.
Yikes.
Well, he was thrown in there for the night, but early the next morning, citizens of Halifax noticed that he was walking around the streets without any shoes on. They wondered why. Well, turns out he had escaped from town jail, only person
There's
who
a
had done
hotel.
so, but he managed to forget his shoes. Well, he did it. I imagine that would have been a bit of an awkward story to explain as he went back to get the footwear, but hey. And we just have a couple more lights to get through here, folks, and then we are going to be splashing into the harbor. Are you guys excited?
Yeah.
Me too, me too. Beautiful out there today. You got a little bit more of a breeze than on land, which I'll be thankful for. I am going to warn you, as we go over the curve onto the ramp, it can be a little bit bumpy. The curve itself is a little bit large, and then there's some potholes on the other side that make it feel a bit bigger. So please just be mindful of that. Nothing to be worried about, but please do just be aware we're going to have some bumps here. Captain Jeff is going to phone into Halifax traffic, ask permission to enter the harbor. Don't worry, they always give it. We just have to ask and just keep them updated on what we're doing so they know who all is in the
Oh, yeah,
harbor,
there's the
what
boat we
time,
saw this morning.
what traffic patterns are going to be happening there.
I'm gonna miss it.
What are you missing?
I need my SD card
Oh.
and my battery. Okay. All right, here we go. Hold on to her. Yikes. Oh. I got wet.
You get wet?
Yeah, I got wet.
Yeah, we made it! Welcome folks!
Look at that.
We have just entered the second largest natural ice-free port in the entire world. I do have a bit of a qualm with this fact though, because we are second only to Sydney, Australia, and Sydney, Australia does not get the winters that we get here. So I personally think we should be number one for the largest ice-free port.
Yes.
But hey, that is a bone to pick with somebody else. In my head, we're still number one. So
There's that boat we saw this morning.
All of it being a very large harbor, we are also very important for shipping in North America. You'll often see container ships coming through our waters, and that's because we're actually about 6th in North America for gross tonnage coming in and out of a port. Out this way we have the mouth of the harbor, 10 kilometers wide. At the widest spot down that way is the Bedford Basin. It's a big area, about 15 square kilometers. And the nearest part of our harbor is just about 1 kilometer wide.
There's our
So
hotel.
kind of like an hourglass shape a little bit.
That's our hotel.
Now over here, Purdy's Towers, these two tall glass-covered buildings, they are just office spaces, so Nothing incredible there, but they do utilize a very neat cooling system, in my opinion. It's a geothermal cooling system that was designed by Dalhousie University engineers, and it uses the harbor water to help cool off the building. So what happens is there's a series of water-filled pipes within the buildings. They circulate, absorbing heat from the different rooms and levels. Then using titanium heat exchangers, that heat gets transferred to a series of water-filled pipes again that lie along the harbor floor. And from there, all the heat in those pipes gets absorbed by the water at the bottom of our harbor. It just uses basic heat transfer, very efficient. The bottom of the harbor is always freezing cold, so it works very well. Saves the company about $100,000 every single year in comparison to traditional air conditioning.
Wow.
And they use those savings actually to invest back into their on-site daycare. So really works out well for them. And it's great they can provide a daycare just by for their employees by just saving that money there from the cleaning costs. Now, just down this way, we have the Harborfront Marriott Hotel.
That's where we are.
It's an excellent waterfront hotel. You can get some rooms with really nice waterfront views.
That's where we are.
But on the main level there, you'll see there's 3 different murals, and I think this is the coolest part. These murals switch up every 6 weeks during the summer months.
Oh, cool.
They are done by artists that the city of Halifax hires, and not only does it give local artists a great chance to showcase some artwork, but when they switch it up, it keeps things fun and exciting for the people who walk the boardwalk regularly. Always some brand new art to see, and it's always done very well. The artists are certainly good at what they do, and they're always so quick. It shocks me. We'll come down first tour of the day, a couple hours later, they're completely done. I don't know how they work so fast.
Holy.
Over here we have our historic properties, folks. These are the oldest waterfront warehouses in North America.
Oh.
Now, they were originally owned and occupied by privateers.
There's
If you know what a pirate is, you pretty much know what a privateer is. Privateers are legal pirates, pretty much. They get a letter from the king or queen of whatever country they're from. It says you can go steal and...
We're going to do that later.
As long as you give me some of whatever you stole. Not the nicest profession for sure. But hey, it existed, and the most famous privateer to come out of Halifax was actually named Enos Collins. He opened the first bank in the city. You can still see where bank is inscribed above the original doorway.
We're going over way.
That has evolved over the years to become the CIBC, as we know it today.
CIBC.
Our ferry terminal just right over here. We have the longest continuously running saltwater ferry service in North America. It was started by one man, and he would row you across the harbor if you were dressed in your Sunday best. It did take an hour each way back then, so maybe not the most efficient though. It's much quicker today.
Look at that child, she's raving.
Transit system, which is awesome. You can use your bus transfer to get across the harbor, or you can just pay the same as a bus fare and get across as well to check out our beautiful sister city of Dartmouth. Now up here, folks, Murphy's Restaurant and some of the other boats we do tours on. Murphy's partnered with Ambassador's Grey Line, provides this tour as well as our others. And Murphy's Restaurant itself sits on a really interesting piece of history here. It's actually the cable wharf, where all the cables that were used to run the transatlantic telegraph system were actually stored originally and then run from. This development, this is the Queen's Mark, named after that letter that a privateer would have gotten, the Queen's Mark. It has lots of apartment spaces in there, some restaurants, and I think there's a couple of spas on the main level and some office spaces as well. The boardwalk is not yet open to the public, but it will be soon. We can all look forward to that, and it's going to open up some really lovely space for folks to enjoy. Further up here, some more historic artifacts, you could say. This is the CSS Acadia, which stands for Canadian Scientific Ship, and it's the oldest ship we have here in our harbor, built in 1913. Wow. It's really had a remarkable life. It survived active service in both World Wars and being in the harbor during the Halifax explosion. Because it's been through so much, it no longer goes out on the waters, but it is part of the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic, which you can see back behind this barge here, and they do walk-on tours of the CSS Acadia. Now over here we have the HMCS Sackville, another really interesting boat. This is the last remaining Corvette out of an original 200 built and used for World War II. The Corvettes had a dangerous job. They escorted convoys across the Atlantic Ocean.
There's the Sea-Doos. Look forward to next video.
The Corvettes, they were the fastest boats at their time, which is why the car was later named after them. Pretty cool. Another claim to fame this boat has, it was actually featured, this very one, in the new movie Greyhound. I believe, is it directed by Tom Hanks? I believe so.
Yeah.
And it's about the Battle of the Atlantic. If you guys are now going home dying to see that movie, keep an eye out because that ship is featured in it.
Oh, cool.
Up here, another barge. They're just doing some construction here on the waterfront. Tourism certainly has taken a hit the past couple of years, not just here in Halifax, but of course everywhere in Canada. But it has given us a unique opportunity to get some development, construction done when it's a bit less busy. So at least we can be thankful for that if we're looking on the bright side of things. They're soon to have this done. They've already opened up the lower portion of it. So it's definitely going to give some more space for folks to come down here, enjoy.
That's where we were.
Some tables set up and things like that. So a lot more seating happening as well. Our boardwalk's about 3.8 kilometers long total. I do recommend walking the whole thing. It is pretty neat to see all of it. Each part of the boardwalk I find has its own unique character. If you need a break, there's these lovely hammocks here to take a little rest in. Although I know there's a couple empty there, but usually they're not empty for long. They go quick, so you gotta snag them fast. Further up ahead here we have Bishop's Landing. Bishop's Landing are amongst the most expensive condos on the boardwalk. When they first were built, they went for $1 million each. And on the main level, though, something for everyone to enjoy. A few different restaurants, shops, boutiques. They have a candy store down there, a rum cake factory. The rum cake is delicious. They also have a few really well-known restaurants, the Bicycle Thief as well as a Mono. Those are both owned by the same hospitality group, and they have a really great reputation in the city. So if you're looking for maybe a waterfront patio meal, this is a great spot to come. Just up ahead, we have these lampposts that look a little bit wonky. These are known as the drunken lampposts. It was an art installation done by students from Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, and it was just to commemorate the nightlife here in Halifax. So pretty funny. They're all supposed to be kind of representing a different, I guess, a different person who would be, you know, in a bit of an intoxicated state. We have this lovely construction site, which I can hear from my apartment every single day. It's so lovely. It is going to be beautiful when it's done. I imagine it's 2023, I think it says there. So still going to be a few years yet until that's completed. But again, it's going to have some beautiful waterfront space.
That's the Discovery Center and Power Center.
But I would recommend checking out the Discovery Center. It's a fun spot for kids or kids at heart. I always have a great time when I go there. It has all sorts of different exhibits, lots of interactive stuff, and they're constantly switching things up just to keep things fun and exciting so you can keep coming back. I find sometimes people will stop when they get to this end of the boardwalk, which makes sense. Outwardly, there's not as much to do, but I think there's still some really valuable things to check out down along here. Ooh, someone caught a fish there. Congrats! We do have our farmers market down at this end.
Oh, it's way down here.
Local produce. Some artisans always come. They have really cool goods to showcase. So if you like farmers markets, we have a great one in my opinion, and I would recommend checking it out down here. We also have down this end the Canadian Museum of Immigration at Pier 21. Not only does it have history on immigration in this country, but it has records going back over 100 years for everyone who has immigrated into the country. It's really, really cool to check those out. You can find specific people if you're looking for them. I believe there is a cost associated with the full report, but If you were interested, I think it's quite reasonable. My family and I did it back when I was about 10, so a number of years ago. I don't remember what the cost was, and it might have changed at this point. But we were able to find the record from my grandfather, who with his family immigrated from Russia. He was only 6 months old, so there wasn't much information we had on it, but luckily we gained some more from there, so it was really, really cool to find that out. That breeze feels good, eh? Oh my gosh, the last few days have been so humid. Now, as we make our turn out here, folks, we have this island here. This is George's Island. And like I mentioned from the top of Citadel Hill, that would have been the first point of communication with that long distance signaling system I talked about. Fort Charlotte is built right into the island there. Fort Charlotte would have been used to protect Halifax from any water-based attacks. Now, the island was closed down to the public for a number of years. The infrastructure had weakened over time, and so they didn't want anyone walking around unsupervised. You actually got a $600 fine if you were found over there without the proper authorization, so definitely not something you want to do. But they're now opening to the public, so you can go over there. On the Harbor Queen, you can get on board, you can pay $25, which includes your admission to the park as well as the ferry ride over there. And of course they've done some construction, so the infrastructure is all safe. I probably should have mentioned that part first. But they've really worked hard on this island, repairing things, getting it all up to top shape so that they can welcome people over there to learn a little bit more about the history of Fort Charlotte. Now, I will hop off the mic here for just a few minutes as we're going back down the waterfront. Enjoy the views. I'll walk down the aisle there. If any of you would like a photo of you or your group, I am more than happy to take one, so please just grab my attention. And I'll be back very shortly with the story of the Halifax explosion. Yeah.
Try and get Daddy in. There's a train over there.
You'll see a train
There goes the ferry. We're doing a ferry, Mom? Yeah. Okay. So we walked all this way, all through this boardwalk.
Alrighty, folks. I'm now going to share with you the story of the Halifax explosion. Now, this event occurred December 6th, 1917, which was during World War I. Wartime protocol here in the harbor a little bit different. Each evening of the war, at around 4 p.m., the harbor would be shut down using anti-U-boat guns, and this was just to protect Halifax from any attacks. We were a very important port at the time of the war. Any military personnel or supplies exiting this country likely would have been exiting from here, so an attack would have been bad for civilians and our war efforts. Now, with these nets going up, it meant if you were a ship and you arrived past 4, you were stuck outside the harbor all night long, leaving you in a bit of a vulnerable position. This was the case, though, for the French munition ship, the Mont Blanc, and it was carrying a dangerous load of cargo: benzol, acid, gunpowder, TNT, thousands of tons of this stuff. Now, it was carrying over the legal limit at the time. There were limits put on that, but because it was wartime, their main concern really was just transporting those dangerous goods as quickly as possible. So they packed the ship to the brim with as much as it could carry. And the other end of our harbor was waiting the Emo. It was a Norwegian vessel that had ventured over this way. And it was safe overnight in the Bedford Basin. It got here before the nets went up. All was good for both ships overnight. Morning of December 6th rolls around, and around 8 in the morning, those nets came down, making it a very, very busy place here in the harbor. Now, the Emo kept getting delayed as it was trying to exit the harbor. Other loads of cargo were taking priority, so by the time the boat, the captain of the ship tried to pass a slower vessel to gain back some of that time so that he could make it to his next port of call since he was delayed in that morning. But now, the Emo is in the wrong lane of water traffic, coming head-to-head with the Mont Blanc. These two ships were coming closer and closer, and neither captain took action. But perhaps the captain of the Emo would have, had it known the Mont Blanc was carrying dangerous goods. A ship carrying dangerous goods is supposed to have a red flag up warning those around it, but the Mont Blanc did not. The ships finally collided, and it wasn't all that bad at first, but there was a 3-meter gash in the hull of the Mont Blanc where the Emo was connected into it. The Emo reversed, and the metal on metal created sparks. They flew through that gash, starting a fire on board the Mont Blanc at 8:45 in the morning. By 9:04 and 35 seconds, the explosion went off. It imploded every single window in the surrounding areas. A tsunami-like shock wave was sent throughout the entire harbor, flooding many areas along the shoreline.
Oh my.
At the north end of our city, it's called the neighborhood of Richmond. At the time, it was completely flattened. Over 2,000 people died in the explosion. Many more were wounded. And as if things couldn't get any worse, the heaviest snowfall in 40 years hit Halifax that very afternoon. People were now homeless, wounded, freezing cold in the face of this blizzard, and what on earth were they to do? Well, thankfully, many people all around heard about this predicament, but the people of Boston went to some extreme measures. They declared a state of emergency in their own city as soon as they heard, and they went to gathering lumber, window panes out of people's homes, blankets, medical supplies, and the entire graduating class of Harvard Medical School. That train arrived to us early in the morning of December 7th, and they immediately set to work. Not only did they help us try and rebuild, but those doctors stayed in the city for 6 weeks following the explosion until everyone was treated through Christmas to help us get back on our feet.
Wow.
We are so thankful to the people of Boston to this very day. It truly took many hands to get Halifax back on its feet and back in working order. We have a tradition with Boston. Every year when December rolls around, we go to the South Shore of Nova Scotia, which is the Douglas fir tree capital of the world. We find a beautiful fir, we chop it down,
It's hard to see, I'm just going to keep this
and then
here.
it sits at Christmas in their common area as a symbol of our gratitude to them. I haven't seen it, but I've heard from people who come on tour that it's quite a beautiful sight, especially when you know the story behind it, so hopefully one day. Has anyone here seen the tree in the Boston Common? No? Well, maybe you guys will too now that you know the story. Alrighty, for exiting here, folks, a couple more little bumps just to be aware of. Captain Jeff has to phone back into Halifax traffic, and then we'll be on our way.
Oh, look at that fountain.
Huh?
The fountain at the casino.
Oh, that's a casino.
Yeah.
Alrighty, how'd you guys like the harbor?
Woo!
Good, I'm glad to hear it. Now that we're back on dry land, I do have one more story to tell you guys. Although I have a feeling most of you know a little bit about this. Hopefully you guys know how it ends. The story of the Hmcs Titanic. The Titanic has some interesting connections to Halifax. It departed Southampton, England, April 10th, 1912. It was a remarkable ship for its time. Truly had all sorts of amenities. It really was a luxury liner. And of course, with all the excitement and advertising for this vessel, a lot of people bought tickets. 2,207 passengers on board, as far as we know. Sailing was fine the first few days, but on the evening of April 14th at 11:40 p.m., the ship struck an iceberg. By 2:20 the next morning, it had fully submerged. I know 2 hours and 40 minutes does sound long, but for a ship of that size, that's actually very quick for it to go down. It should have taken hours longer to sink. A few contributing factors to this, though, and a couple of them weren't discovered until after the wreckage was found many years later. One was that there was a fire that broke out on board with the Titanic in the furnace room. Now this fire they did get it under control, but it got quite hot and ended up warping some metal doors in the underbelly of the ship. Those doors were put in place so that if damage occurred, they could section it off and make sure that it didn't travel further than it needed to. Well, when damage did occur, unfortunately those doors were warped so they wouldn't seal the water in. Another factor, the hull of the Titanic was made out of number 3 wrought iron, but the standard of hull building at the time was number 4 wrought iron.
That's where we're staying.
It was a much cheaper alloy frigid northern Atlantic waters would have been weakened even further, and that is why a lot of people predict the ship was broken into multiple pieces as it went down. Of course, after it did go down, people were in lifeboats, many people in the water itself though. Frigid cold waters, you can imagine early April in the northern Atlantic. Hypothermia would have set in very shortly, and sadly, we were the nearest available port at that point to send ships out of. But by nearest, I mean 630 nautical miles away. By the time any of our vessels could actually depart, make their way that distance, it had been over 2 days, and at that point, a recovery mission rather than a rescue. Many remains and artifacts were brought back here to the city. Now, I'll touch on the remains first. Those were placed in 3 separate cemeteries. The largest of the 3 is the Fairview Lawn Cemetery, which is up on Windsor Street. You'll also notice in there are some victims from the Halifax explosion buried in there as well, which is pretty interesting, so you kind of can see 2 little bits of history at once. So if you want to visit there, I recommend it. Pretty interesting. The artifacts are found in the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic. They have the largest collection of genuine wooden artifacts from the wreckage in there, so worthwhile checking out too if you're interested in Titanic history. One person who came to the city who was quite interested in Titanic history, so much so that he made a movie, James Cameron, director of the movie The Titanic. They did about 80% of the filming for that year, so he was in the area a lot. He visited both those locations, then time went on, the movie comes out, all of North America falls in love with Mr. Jack Dawson, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. Well, people saw the movie, and then they realized there was a headstone in the Fairview lawn with the name J. Dawson on it. They started putting 2 and 2 together, assumed that this movie was about a real man and his story. Soon, the Fairview lawn became one of the most popular tourist destinations in Halifax. People flooded there to J. Dawson's graveside. Well, a historian, thankfully for him, he thought something didn't sound quite right, so he did some research of his own, and quickly found out the man buried in the Fairview lawn was named Joseph Dawson. He was a stoker in the furnaces of the Titanic. Maybe he could have shared with us some information about that furnace fire that had broken out, but you can imagine that bit of news did burst a few people's bubbles, and thus a few less visits to the Fairview lawn. Here in Halifax, though, we weren't quite ready to let go of the money-making opportunity that was associated with the J. Dawson namesake. So, J. Dawson's Ice Cream proceeded to open up down on the boardwalk. However, after the first summer, it too went under. I promise that's the last bad joke you have to hear from me. Folks, I will tell you one more fact though, before we go, and maybe a bit of a word of warning. Halifax used to be known for its interesting naval recruitment methods. The press gang was one of them. That was where a group of young men already in the Navy would go around one evening to the bars. They would find a young, strong man, take women in the Navy back then, so they'd find a young, strong man, they'd drop a gold coin in his drink when he wasn't looking. Well, he'd finish his beverage, finds a gold coin in the bottom of his glass, his lucky day, goes up to the bar, buys another round. As soon as he'd done so, the press gang would come up to him, intimidatingly, I imagine, and say, "You just spent your first day's wage in the Navy, we'll see you Monday morning."
Oh,
I know, not very nice,
awful.
but folks, this hasn't happened for quite some time. I don't think it's going to happen to you, but if you do find a gold coin in the bottom of your drink, please don't spend it, or you might be signing up for something you didn't intend to. Thank you guys so much. Did you have a good time with us today? Awesome. I'm so glad to hear it. You were such a fun group. Thank you so, so much. Let's get a round of applause for Captain Jeff. Many thanks to Jeff, as always, for his vigilance and safe driving. Folks, I'm just going to head to the back, start lowering the stairs. I ask you to remain seated until the vehicle makes a complete stop. Once it has done so, feel free to disembark. Please just give people some space as you do. Thank you so, so much. I really do hope you had a good time. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, if we exceeded your expectations today and you have anything for the captain or myself, I will be at the bottom of the stairs there. Again, like I mentioned a couple times in the tour, we can give recommendations. I can look something up for you if you'd like. So please, just let us know. Thank you once again. Have a lovely day, and we appreciate you choosing Harbor Hopper Tours.